here we come. Yeah, here we come. Hey, here we come. Here we come. Here we come. Yeah, here we come. Hey, here we come. Hey, here we come. Here we come.
Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides upcoming changes video. My name is Christoph, and today I'll be going over all the upcoming changes that are planned for patch 9.9. Everything that's mentioned here can be found on the PBE right now, but please do keep in mind that nothing is set in stone, and Riot can make some additional changes before patch 9.9 hits the live server. Let's start with the top lane. Darius is a common favorite for many players below Platinum, and currently has a decent stance in the meta. However, with a lot of his counterparts receiving buffs in the past few patches, it's become quite hard for him to keep up. As for now, he has a few buffs planned for his Q, Decimate, which are currently on the PBE. His Q's damage will be increased by 10 at all ranks, followed by a buff to its healing. These changes are going to be really good for Darius and might even make him an S tier pick for patch 9.9. Next, we have Maokai. The Tree Man has been non-existent in the past few patches, but is finally receiving some love on the PBE. His Q, Bramble Smash, will have its damage increased by a decent amount and will help him out a lot. It's hard to say if these changes will be good enough to make Maokai relevant again, but we'll keep a close eye on him for our next patch rundown. Kennen will have a small quality of life change for patch 9.9. The bonus armor and magic resist that his E grants will now be moved to his ultimate, Slicing Maelstrom. Shen is another champion who's been struggling to find success in the top lane even with recent buffs to his kit. Shen will have his attack speed per level increased by 1 and his bonus health damage increased on his E, Shadow Dash. These are very minor buffs and will likely result in Shen still being a C-tier top laner. Volibear has been struggling to find a solid stance in the meta even with huge buffs he's received a few patches ago. There's a buff planned for his W which will increase its damage per stack by a small amount. The Aatrox rework is finally here and will likely hit the live servers on patch 9.9. Firstly, his Q, the Darkened Blade, will have its damage increased by a small amount, but receive a compensation nerf to its cooldown. In addition, it'll also have its max time in between casts lowered from 4 to 3. Next up is W, Infernal Chains, will have its slow change from 15% at rank 1 to 35% at all ranks, but will have its cooldown increased by a sizable amount. His E, Umbral Dash, will have its healing source changed from physical champion damage to non-periodic champion damage of any type. Lastly, his ultimate will be receiving an entire overhaul, and it'll drastically change Aatrox's stance in the meta. The new World Ender will have its cooldown reduced by 20 seconds, followed by its cast time getting cut in half. On top of all that, it will now grant a ton of movement speed, which decays over the duration of World Ender, and also grant him an insane amount of increased healing. But wait, there is more. World Ender will also have its duration extended for enemy takedowns and also heal a solid 30% of his max HP after a revive. These changes are ridiculously good for Aatrox and will probably make him an S tier pick once again. Teemo will receive a small rework but will likely be released in patch 9.10. We'll go over the changes in our next upcoming changes video, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see that. Alright, let's get on to the jungle. Hecarim's been a tad too strong recently and was long overdue for a nerf. To keep Hecarim in check, he will have the damage on his E, Devastating Charge, reduced by a decent amount and will likely result in him dropping to the A tier. Jarvan has been finding a lot of success in the jungle recently and has seen a ton of competitive play. On the PB right now, he has a few nerfs planned for 9.9, which will affect his tankiness and survivability. First up, he will have his base HP, mana, and mana regen reduced by a small amount, but these changes are more like tiny adjustments rather than actual nerfs. Next up, his W will have its bonus shield changed to 1.5% of J4's max HP per nearby champion, rather than 2 to 3% for each nearby enemy. Lastly, his E will have its cooldown increased by 1 second. These changes will drop J4 into our A tier for jungle, but we'll definitely have to wait and see. Rek'Sai has been sitting at the top of the jungle tier list ever since the quality of life changes she received a few patches ago. To keep Rek'Sai in check, she will have a few nerfs made to her kit for patch 9.9. Her base AD will be decreased by a small amount, followed by a small nerf to her AD per level. Lastly, her Q, Prey Seeker, will have its cooldown increased to 12 seconds from 11 seconds at rank 1. These are rather small nerfs and will probably not impact her stance in the meta. Alright, let's get on to the mid lane. The recent nerfs to Lissandra were a bit too much and made her weaker than what the balanced team intended. To bring Lissandra back into the meta, once again, she will have her Ring of Frost damage increased by a small amount and its AP ratio doubled. These are huge buffs for her, and she will likely move up to our A tier or even S tier for next patch. Akali has been making a great comeback ever since the heavy nerfs made to her a few patches ago. She does seem a little bit too strong right now, and she will have her W Twilight Shroud's duration and cooldown nerfed for patch 9.9. Morgana's been one of the most sleeper OP champions in the mid lane and will finally be receiving a nerf. Her Black Shield will have its strength reduced by a sizable amount at all ranks, followed by a cooldown increased by 3 seconds. This will likely affect her support role much more than her mid, but is definitely a heavy nerf. There are no planned changes for ADCs in patch 9.9, so we'll go straight to the supports. The Blitzcrank mini rework will finally hit the live servers for patch 9.9. His mana barrier will be changed from 50% of his current mana to 30% of his max mana. In addition, his ultimate passive Static Field will no longer deal damage to random targets around him, but instead will buff his auto attacks. Soraka is looking at a lot of changes for patch 9.9. Firstly, her Q, Starfall, will have its cooldown increased by a decent amount, followed by a buff to its self-healing. The Rejuvenation ally healing will also be buffed by a decent amount, followed by a nerf to its total damage. Lastly, Rejuvenation's haste will be increased to 14%, decaying movement speed at rank 1 from 10% at all ranks. Next up, her E, Equinox, will have its cooldown decreased by a decent amount in the early ranks, followed by a buff to its mana cost. However, Equinox will also receive a compensation nerf to its damage in the mid to late stages of the game. Tahm Kench is one of the weakest supports in the game right now for solo queue, but honestly is just too good in pro play. In order to balance out his strengths, Tahm Kench will receive a ton of changes for patch 9.9. His Q, Tongue Lash, will have its duration increased to 2 seconds at all ranks, followed by a nerf to its cooldown. The missile range for his Q will be increased by 50, and its slow will be buffed by 20% in the early stages of the game. Next, his W, Devour, will now ground and slow himself when Tahm devours an allied champion. The mana cost for this ability will be increased to 100, but will refund 50% of its total cost upon devouring an enemy champion. The minion projectile damage will be decreased by a small amount, and its enemy devour damage will be changed as well. And finally, his ultimate will have its cooldown and early range nerfed, but will now have a much longer range in the later stages of the game. And finally, we have Rakan. Rakan has created a ton of problems when it comes to counterplay because it's just too hard for the average player to react to his ultimate combined with his dashes. Put Rakan in check, he will no longer be able to cast his E or W during the duration of his ultimate. In addition, his charm duration will be lowered by a sizable amount and will now have a 0.5 second cast time. However, he will receive some compensation buffs to his movement speed and his base AD. Lastly, his W, Grand Entrance, will have its dash speed increased by 350. On to the runes. There are a ton of changes for items and runes this patch, and here's a list of them that we'll go over briefly. Cheap Shot will have its bonus damage buffed by a small amount. Taste of Blood will have its cooldown decreased, but will now heal for less. Ghost Poro will no longer grant adaptive bonuses when a Ghost Poro spots an enemy champion. Ultimate Hunter will have its stack percentage increased by 1%. Relentless Hunter will have its movement speed increased by 2 per stack. Celerity will now make your movement speed bonuses 7% more effective as long as you have 1% additional movement speed. Scorch will have its bonus damage increased by a decent amount. Bone Plating will be buffed by a decent amount. Conditioning will have its bonus armor and magic resist increased by 1. Magical Footwear will have its timer increased by 2 minutes, but will receive a compensation buff on its timer reduction. Manamune will have its AD increased by 10, and there will be visual reworks for Ashe, Blitzcrank, Caitlyn, Jax, and sound effects updates for Renekton. These may come out in patch 9.9 or even patch 9.10. That's it for our upcoming changes video for patch 9.9. Let us know what change you're most excited about down below, and if you enjoyed watching this video, then please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to be notified for the next one. Also, make sure to check out ProGuides.com using the link below if you guys want to see some huge improvements to your rank. Thank you guys so much for watching, good luck in your next games, and we'll see you on the Rift.